Hey, buddy. How are you doing?
I don't like how fast my body metabolizes local anesthetic. The nice doctor lady injected me like 3 times and it still wore off after like 10 minutes.
Yes, I heard the swearing. You lose your creative spark when you are dealing with needles.
Yeah, well, why say different cusses when repeated F-bomb do trick?
Were you a big brave witch about the needles?
I was the bravest witch there ever was.
Did you get your lollipop?
Yeah, I got my lollipop, you freaking sarcastic scrap heap.
Wonderful. Do you need help getting into bed?
No, I'm fine. I'm down here on purpose. Hold on, let me write myself up conveniently off screen so we don't have to address the limitations of my model tracking. Alley-oop. There we go.
Why were you down there?
Well, I can't see the projector screen from my bed, and I wanted to watch that new Fallout show, you know? Since over 450 people as of today have watched my last video, I'm, obligated to talk about it or something. Also, I can't qualify for any sort of monetization if I don't build up a channel history, and my current recording session is...
Meanwhile...
enough for one wabba. Be a good wabba. Fuck, that was not a good wabba. It's going fine. Why do you ask?
I see. So this is the new Fallout? I have heard that it was divisive with some of the more hardcore old school fans.
Man, it's fucking Bethesda. Todd Howard could sneeze at the Game Awards and people would be divided on whether it was God's gift to olfactory immune responses or a contender for the top 10 fakest sneezes of all time.
And I suppose yours is the objectively correct opinion.
I'll have you know I'm always right.
Okay then, Lord of the Nuance, what is thine hottest off takes? What is your stance in the new Fallout show?
I think it's pretty good.
Hello there.
So here's a fun little fact about me. I don't generally have a lot to say about media I wholly dislike. There's exceptions to this, of course. Once I get my computer upgraded, there's gonna be a pretty solid few months where it's oops all criticisms about Starfield's world building and character writing. But usually if I don't like a whole ass game or movie, I'm not gonna really want to devote a whole lot of time to thinking about it. Unless I believe that there was a bevy of missed potential for something much better. It's why I'll talk all day about the flaws in Fallout 4, a game I love enough to ruin my sleep schedule writing hundreds of thousands of words of fanfiction about, but it'll probably be a cold day in hell before I make a video of any comparable length on Fallout 3, a game whose main plot I found to be the Christian rock album of Fallout. Someone please teach Mr. Pagliarulo to write about things other than dads and Catholicism before Elder Scrolls 6. I am begging you. It's just a matter of interest. The more I like a thing, the more I'm interested in it. The more I'm interested in it, the more I'll talk about it. So, the fact that I binged the entirety of Amazon's Fallout television series and then immediately went to write the script should tell you quite a bit about how much I like this series. I don't think it's entirely devoid of flaws, but the flaws were never enough to do anything more than lightly graze my enjoyment of it. Overall, it was delightful, and I'd like to talk a bit more about what I did like and what very little I didn't. Before all that, though, 2 things. Firstly, while I will be doing my best to avoid going into too much detail, this will not be a spoiler-free review and will contain spoilers for the show dropped whenever and wherever. This is your only spoiler warning, so if you want to avoid them entirely before seeing the show itself, go watch it and come back. I promise I'll understand if the engagement graph plummets after this paragraph. Secondly, this video's probably gonna be a little less tightly edited than my last affair. Partially because if I spend that kind of time on another video like that right away, I will explode. Partially because this is a bit of a sudden decision kind of video that's cutting in line a bit. And partially because I don't actually have a whole lot of footage from the show to cut across what's probably going to be a few thousand words of footage.
A few.
Zip your trap, Sam. I don't watch much television, and when I do it on the family TV. Not really suitable for an OBS setup, you know? So with that in mind, there's probably going to be a lot of spare B-roll and unedited footage of me building Mercer's safe house and my modded playthrough in between what clips I can dab from advertising. So, you know, feel free to banish me to the second monitor, you're not missing too much. I'm going to break this review down into two parts. A review of this show from a more conventional production standpoint, and a review of it as a Fallout medium specifically. But before I do that, I want to answer one very simple question from curious newcomers. Is this show accessible to Fallout newbies? I mean, I didn't think so at first. The show doesn't exactly put a lot of effort into telling you what the Brotherhood of Steel is, or the history of Vault-Tec or the NCR, it just shows these things to you and expects you to already have the context necessary to understand its relevance. And I thought that lack of foreknowledge would confuse people not already familiar. The first draft of this script had the answer as a solid no. But, apparently the show led to a spike in game sales, so either people are just super nostalgic for the series and rebuying it on new systems, or the show was more friendly to Fallout newbies than I assumed it would be as a definitive non-newbie. I still wouldn't personally recommend it as your first introduction to the series, but reality has proven that I don't know shit, so take that as you will. Now, with all that groundwork out of the way, let's first talk about this show is really well made, you guys. First off, straight up, the cast is really good and all the actors do wonderfully. Ella Purcell, as the lead, captures the inherent doe-eyed hysteria of a fresh vaultee experiencing the gleeful horror of the outside world wonderfully. I was worried going in that Lucy would end up being a somewhat bland audience surrogate, but her frank naivete, stubborn adherence to her ideals, and genuine intelligence and inventiveness all help make her stand out as her own person. Lucy certainly loses her innocence to the wasteland, hard not to, but she doesn't lose her moral code. Nothing about the progression of her personality and worldview is going to be especially surprising to any audience. She's on a classic tragic hero's journey, but executing a common trope well is better than fumbling the bag on an attempted subversion, and Lucy's executed really well. Aspirant Maximus is executed really well too, in ways that are more complex and subtle, but no less interesting. He's introduced as a ragtag underdog aspirant, beaten down by life, his fellow aspirants, and basically everything. And while he has generally heroic ideals of knighthood, he's an orphan survivor of nuclear travesty who was raised and hazed by a militant technocratic cult. His emotional growth isn't the healthiest, to put it lightly, and he's prone to abusing physical force and power over others, much like what was done to him. In many ways, he is still that orphan boy we keep getting flashbacks to, never really having had the chance to grow and mature past that trauma. And that state of emotional arrest basically defines a lot of why he does the things he does. A lot of his story's still in the setup phase by the end of Season 1, but I have every faith that we're getting some big payoffs down the line, delivered wonderfully by Aaron Moten, who is masterful at portraying the layers and complexity of Maximus's very messy emotional state at any given time. Seriously, I've never seen someone capture the specificity of, I'm trying to put on a brave face, but there's a walking tank pacing threatening behind me and I might get punished and killed for something I didn't do and I'm about 2 seconds away from bursting into big blubbery tears about it before this show. Love it. Love him. Mwah, mwah, mwah. And while the romantic subplot between Lucy and Max progresses a little quickly for my personal taste, I'm a slow burn kind of witch, it makes a lot of sense for their characters. Lucy grew up in a vault where arranged marriages were the primary way couples got together, so the idea of being with someone you don't know super well wouldn't hinder her. And everyone else she's met up top has been a massive dick. Of course she'd look at the first medium nice hottie out in the waist and go, ah yes, husband material. And Max is an inexperienced goober whose sex education begins and ends at the penis exists ? So I absolutely believe he'd fall for Lucy just as quickly. Again, speedy romances are not my cup of tea, but for once I don't really mind it. They're young, they're dorks, let them smooch. If nothing else, it's very funny watching the relatively experienced and sexually forward Lucy grapple with the fact that the wasteland's sexual education is so bad that this grown man she likes doesn't even know what ejaculation is. Lucy's brother Norm at first seemed like he was going to be a one-episode wonder, but he ended up being one of the core drivers in uncovering the greater mystery at the heart of the plot. His story was actually one of the more interesting ones to me because it covered one of my favorite parts of Fallout exploration, and that's exploring the fucked up pre-war shit, and especially the vaults. I'll talk about this later, but I loved the atmosphere of Norm's parts. And as a character, Norm's intelligence, keen perceptiveness, and inevitable rebellion against the saccharine facade of the vault system is a natural fit into the story, complementing the other protagonists, but not making them redundant. Additionally, Moises Arias plays him perfectly as someone who was born to be an angsty emo hacker teen but is stuck in the schmaltzy apple pie trappings of Vault 33. Someone give Norm the oversized black hoodie and greasy unwashed bangs he deserves. And then we have the resident fan favorite amoral badass, the Ghoul. The Ghoul is not a nice guy. Waterboards an innocent woman as bait, cuts her finger off out of spite after starving her for a week, and goads a teenage boy into drawing his gun just so he has a reason to kill him. He's vicious and cruel, and a far, far contrast to our introduction to his pre-war self, a loving father so principled he hesitated to play a sheriff killing a criminal in a movie. That contrast between who Cooper Howard the actor is and who Cooper Howard the vicious bounty hunter is one of the more interesting things about the character, with both sides being played in pitch-perfect contrast by Walton Goggins, and I'm hopeful to watch more of his backstory unfold and see more clearly how one transitioned into the other. The initial antagonistic force of the plot, Lee Moldaver, doesn't have nearly as much screen time as the four main leads, but the mystery surrounding who she is and what she's up to end up looming large over the story regardless. Why did she take Lucy and Norm's dad? Why does she want the Enclave scientist and the mysterious MacGuffin he injected into his neck? And if I ask very nicely, will she step on me? These mysteries dovetail into the greater mysteries of Vault 33 and Vault-Tec as a whole, leading to many very tightly written reveals. Moldaver may not have the screen time that her protagonist counterparts do, but what she does have, she uses very well. This depth and authenticity of character doesn't stop at the four protagonists or any antagonistic counterparts, though. It extends from major supporting cast all the way to one set-piece wonders. Like supply shop owner Ma June stopping in the middle of a life-or-death situation to apologize to her wife for shouting at her. Keep in mind that June has been shot in the leg and has every reason to be testy at that moment. Followed up with her wife brushing it off with a, you yelled at the wedding. Carried more romantic history in it than most romantic leads in other shows could even dream of. Straight up, I've lived in states with huge rural communities most of my life, and yeah, that's basically what bitchy old rural lesbians are like. God, I hope this two got out of Dodge before the Brotherhood hit Philly. Almost every single wasteland wackadoo, big and small, is played impeccably by their actors, each bringing a humanity and charisma to the wasteland even at its most gruesome. The show would not work without its characters and cast, and it nailed that landing perfectly. It also wouldn't work if the production team hadn't busted their asses to make the world look the way it does. The specific blend of nuclear post-apocalypse and 50s ray gun gothic is a unique one that defines Fallout as a whole. And the set designers clearly worked hard to make each location feel real. From the swaths of blasted desert to the flooded cityscapes to the bombed-out abandoned buildings. Matching the sets and props is the costume and makeup design. The pre-war eras feel like the real, technically not the 50s, from the pencil curls to the beatnik turtlenecks. And the scrappy, tattered post-war clothing everyone wears truly feels lived in and real. The approach the costume team took with the iconic blue vault suits is an excellent one, blending the detailing of the Fallout 4 suits with the looser utility coveralls feel of the Fallout 3 and New Vegas suits. Of course, anyone who's tried to watch the 8th season of Game of Thrones knows that all this set and costume design would mean nothing if we couldn't fucking see it. But there's nothing to worry about here. Each scene is well lit and composited in a way that keeps your eye focused where it needs to be, without obfuscating what it wants to show you. The show is bright and colorful, never letting its dark subject matter or setting get in the way of visual clarity. Speaking of Game of Thrones, the music is also great. Ramin Djawadi is Ramin Djawadiing all over the soundtrack, integrating some classic Fallout leitmotifs into new and exciting stuff. One track that stood out to me is the Ghoul's signature theme, which has this little vocal riff that's like almost Western, but wrong in a way that's both familiar and deeply unsettling, just like the man himself. There are some production flaws, admittedly. No show is true perfection. It's mostly the editing for me. While each individual shot is well done, there are multiple points when a shot is lingered on too long or not long enough. I remember one specific instance in episode 1, I think, where the camera pans away from the Vault 33 entrance and towards some ruins, and it feels like we're getting a sweeping scenery pan, but it cuts off way too soon and it felt awkward. The timing of the editing and cuts is probably the weakest part of the production for me. Additionally, there were a few brief moments with the Power Armor sound design early on where it felt a little too loud and clunky, but I'm not sure if that's an actual issue with the audio design choices or some part of my brain that still has an interest in cosplay reminding me that the exterior plating of the armor is most likely spray-painted EVA foam or something similar, and that it isn't making the sound in real life. That uncanny disconnect definitely went away after a couple episodes, so it's at very worst a minor quibble. So yeah, from a purely technical production level, divorced from its roots as an adaptation, the show's about as good as one can get. That $150 million budget shows on every inch of the screen. But the show isn't divorced from its roots, it's a Fallout show. Says it right in the title. So how does it hold up on that front? Also pretty damn good, as it turns out. The Fallout series tone isn't entirely unique to the world. Plenty of stories have balanced post-apocalyptic horror with over-the-top violent wackiness. But that doesn't mean striking that balance is any less of a tightrope. Too wacky and the serious stuff stops being serious. Too serious and the wacky stuff seems insensitive. Luckily, the Fallout show knows how to capture the tone of the games. The show revels in its own gleeful carnage, the vulgarity is delightfully over the top, and the characters in the tone often delve into the absurd and characterized, all classic staples of the series. It's also funny in a way that shows that the screenwriters knew what playing the games felt like. From the power armor-clad knight fleeing to Yaoguai while swearing up a storm, to the ghoul's exasperation at having to divert off the main plot to pursue important side questing, the show manages to capture the tone of playing the games without feeling gamey. Not that it doesn't do a good job of integrating game mechanics into diegetic world building. The let me mark it on your map aspect of questing is shown with Ma June manually entering coordinates into Lucy's Pip-Boy, which comes with its own personal tracker that she shoves into the MacGuffin to keep an eye on where it is, just like the personal quest markers of the game. I really enjoyed these details. While I'm generally on team non-diegetic gameplay mechanics, the way they were specifically portrayed felt creative and natural, lending an air of authenticity that, once again, kept the world from feeling too much like it was trying to be a video game world. But beyond all that, when the show needs to get serious, it drops all of it and makes way for serious tension and vulnerability. There's real horror in Fallout, not in the horrific mutants or evil raiders, but in the underlying horrors that pre-war America inflicted on itself. The vaults and their implications are scarier than any Yaogwai, and there's no scene in the show more terrifying or full of tension than Norm and his cousin Chet walking down the abandoned, corpse-filled Vault 32 trying to figure out just what the fuck happened. The cast and crew all got it when it came to what each scene needed. Comedy, action, drama, or terror, and never let any one mood sour another. Which is good because so much of what makes the story of the show work is carried in the presentation and tone. And also just really good plotting and writing. That too. If I could best describe the story of the Fallout show, it would be, hey, what if the main plot of Fallout 3 actually had something interesting to say? The beats of the initial plot hook do seem pretty similar, don't they? A wide-eyed young Vault Dweller's dad goes missing, and the only way to find him is for her to leave the vault and enter the blasted-out coastal wastes. Along the way, she finds out about a plot to bring some sort of safe resource to that wasteland en masse, and also the Brotherhood and Enclave are involved, and there's a dog who is just the goodest of girls. Yes, she is. Yes, she is. But the story actually delves into a serious and interesting exploration of the world it's been given to work with, rather than themes of vague messianic allegory and...
It looks like he may commit suicide. Suicide is badass.
No.
Fallout's never been subtle with its criticisms of American war culture, and the show's no exception. Like, this is the same show that in episode 2 introduces the Enclave, self-proclaimed last remnants of the American government, incinerating newborn puppies alive. Oh, you think I'm fucking joking? But the Enclave's a bit player in this story. The real antagonist of the story is Vault-Tec, and the show's exploration of the company both pre-war and post-war posits a very simple but incredibly damning question that fits right into Fallout's critique. When the biggest company in the world banks its potential profits off of the certainty of nuclear annihilation, then what hope could there have ever been for anything else? Not only is it a great recognition on the screenwriter's behalf of the fucked up subtext of the world they were given to play with, and a great turn of that subtext to text, but it's also a criticism of our modern day, of how the military-industrial complex needs America to be in its forever wars in order to sell its guns and fighter jets. Violence is one of our nation's biggest exports. Peace doesn't benefit the shareholders. So it's pretty fair to say that the writers get what Fallout was about, and the way that it stripped down the sanitized apple pie and picket fence veneer of 50s America to showcase the bone-deep flaws hiding beneath. It's thematically everything that old-school, hardcore lorehounds wanted out of Fallout as a franchise, and everything they criticized Bethesda games for lacking in their main plots. So, why are the lorehounds still bitching? People have been pointing to the show and claiming that it retconned West Coast lore and uses these so-called retcons as proof of their long-running grand conspiracy that Todd Howard Totes McGoats wants to erase all non-Bethesda games from canon so that they can have the most control over a video game IP or something because he's like jealous that people like New Vegas or whatever. You know, that typical gamer rage baby persecution complex. Having watched the show before digging into any conversation about it, I could only really point to 2 moments of note. One that I consider to be a genuine retcon that I don't enjoy as an addition to the lore, and one that I think is people just not fully understanding what the show is saying. The latter is probably the most noteworthy one everyone's talking about, and that's the destruction of Shady Sands and the Fallout 4 chalkboard, which are 2 separate things, but people talk about them in tandem, and so will we. I'm not going to say I don't get why people might be upset at Shady Sands getting nuked basically off screen, because I do understand it. The world of Fallout is a character of its own, and no one likes finding out that their favorite character got hit with a terminal case of off-screen-itis. Disappointment, sorrow, and dissatisfaction of the choices made on their own terms is fair enough. But, the disappearance of Vivek and the majority of the Tamrielic Empire's collapse both happened off-screen and between games, and we all got over it. New status quos happen in these worlds, And given that the cyclical destruction of society by factions desperately trying to maintain their control over society is kind of a running thing that keeps happening in the background of all these games, it's not that surprising that the NCR, or at least part of it, would be a victim of this cycle. It's not Todd Howard ruthlessly destroying insert thing you specifically like here out of some petty jealousy. It's not Bethesda not getting it. It's a continuation of the story as it was presented. You can dislike it, yeah, but you gotta dislike it in good faith,
Bold of you to assume that anyone in the internet would ever do anything in good faith.
Oh, come on, that's not true.
They saw one date in a chalkboard and lost their fucking minds.
Okay, fine, it's not entirely true then. Yeah, a lot of people are mad about the chalkboard in Vault 4 and it referring to 2277 as the year of the fall of Shady Sands. Now, I had a big diatribe here about the non-retcon possibilities, ranging from production error it happens to fall is referring to the general geopolitical downturn of the city as a symptom of the NCR's broader issues as seen in New Vegas predating the bomb, not the bomb itself, but then Todd Howard went and confirmed it as the latter before I was halfway through the script, so those paragraphs went out the window. Let the record show that I am still very correct and very smart and in possession of all of the Fallout fandom's media literacy because that was my first understanding of the chalkboard before I realized it might also just be a production error.
The record will not show that, because the record does not wish to stroke your already inflated ego.
But yeah, no, we knew from New Vegas that the NCR was having a bad time since at least the first Battle of Hoover Dam in, oh, look at that. 2277. It's not against the lore that one of their big city-states has fractured and lost its title as an economic and political powerhouse since then. It's in tandem with lore. It's a natural conclusion of lore. If it's not 100% lore accurate, then it's at least 100% lore appropriate. No, the genuine retcon I noticed and viewed as a negative change was the introduction of those ghoul-specific rad drugs that ward off feral behavior and defined Ghoul's goal for a couple of episodes. Like, as the premiere, the lore serves the story, bitch, I recognize the narrative purpose of those drugs. The Ghoul needed some sort of nerf, which the need for an anti-feral drug does provide, as it is a constant weight on his priorities and sense of self, and the inclusion of this metaphorical snooze button opens up the possibility that one day he will go feral, adding an additional layer of tension, uncertainty, and potential tragedy to his arc and quest to find his family despite everything. These are all good things. I like that these things are specifically in Cooper Howard's story. That being said, the possible idea that this is some universal thing all ghouls need to not be feral is a new addition to the lore, and one that retroactively alters, even if minutely, the story of every single ghoul in the series, which I don't like as much. Okay, maybe not Hancock, he's a very big bucket of drugs already, what's an anti-feral agent mixed in there, but everyone else. Like, take Dean Domino, for instance, who was isolated and alone in the Sierra Madre for nearly 2 centuries before getting collared by Elijah, and thus couldn't have had access to this anti-feral agent because he was too busy not knowing it existed. Or Billy, who was in a fridge for 2 centuries. Or Billy's parents, who live in a house in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. See, I go and defend the logic of the kid in a fridge quest using lore from games hardcore Fallout lore nerds slobber over, and not 3 days later watch the Fallout series introduce a ghoul lore element that really does call the quest's internal logic into question. The universe has a sense of humor, and its favorite joke is kicking me while I am down. I suppose I could accept the answer that the drug is a preventative for ghouls who are already turning feral, and all the ghouls we've met in-game just aren't doing that yet. And while I personally don't like the late addition to the lore as a whole, like I said, I get it for this story in particular. So, even in terms of unwelcome retcons, it's very much a mixed bag due to the frankly incredible writing. And when the worst I can say about my least favorite aspect of the show's world building is I don't like the addition to the greater universe, but I fuck hard with its inclusion in this story in particular, then it's safe to say that the world's been mostly done justice. To put a needlessly long and rambly script succinctly, 5,000 words, holy shit, I don't know when to shut up. The 2024 Amazon TV series makes for good television and good fallout, with big, exciting ideas about the world that are sure to be explored both in future seasons of the show and future installments of the game series. Once Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, after the heat death of the universe, I vastly recommend it to anyone who likes Fallout and has a day off to kill. At 8 episodes of about an hour each, it's not an overly demanding watch, and it's real fun in a lot of ways. Life's too short to let yourself miss out on a great time. I know I'll certainly be looking forward to Season 2. If only to finally get my live-action Deathclaw fix. Please, Todd, I need it!
Hex, why is this video 3 weeks late?
You say something? Hello. Sorry for the delay on this one. I joked in the video that it's because of chocobo racing, but in reality it's more the fact that May has been kicking my fucking ass lately. Just allergies, entire right side of my head just feels like it is about to explode at any given point, and chocobo racing is the only thing I have the brain power for right now. But, got it edited, got it done. Looking forward to Season 2, and really, I'm gonna be honest, I really just want to see a Deathclaw in live action. Really looking forward to that specifically, everything else is just gravy. But, yeah, not much else to say on account of the prior mentioned brain explodey thing. So I am going to wrap this up and down another Benadryl and go nap for another 12 hours, I guess. Bye! I don't like...
All systems are go, ma'am.
Ada, I'm recording.